I am mixing up some Paynes grey here. I'm using an old brush so I can get plenty of paint. It doesn't wear out the tip of my rounded brushes, so plenty of paint. And I always squeeze freshly squeezed tubed paint into my pans. And if your pans have dried out a little bit, just give them a spritz about 30 minutes beforehand. To soften them up, I'm also adding a pinch of ultramarine here to get a grey blue, and it's quite a milky consistency, and mix up plenty of paint. I'm also mixing up a little bit more of a grey blue, so it's more Paynes grey and a pinch of that grey blue that I mixed. I'm now mixing up some quinacridone gold. Try not to contaminate your colours, so make sure you always change your water pots. And I've mixed up a milky consistency. So I'm using a large brush and I'm wetting the paper randomly with just clean water. So I'm just pouring this quinacridone gold onto the paper. Now you may want to have some old rags, etc. underneath to catch the paint, or even a little tray. And I am tilting to get the paint moving. Because it's not moving very much, I am spritzing and just tilting each and any way. I'm just going with my instincts. What I will say at the beginning here is less is more. So sometimes don't overdo it. Just see what happens. Use the back of an old piece of watercolour paper and don't feel the pressure. And this is a really good warm-up exercise as well for maybe a more representational painting. So treat it that way. Don't put any pressure on yourself and just spritz and enjoy the watercolour. So I'm using a pipette now to apply some of the quinacridone gold. You can make the paint thicker if you like by adding more paint. So I'm sort of putting it in the middle here, and I always seem to instinctively go for kind of like land and water. So this could be sort of the water's edge. It may change, but this is where my instincts go, but you go where your instincts take you. This is just a guide. So again, tilt. Now what I love about quinacridone gold, and you can see it here, when it's very pale, it's so yellow, and when it's slightly deeper, it's a little bit more orangey and earthy. It's a really versatile colour, and it makes some fantastic greens. So I'm spritzing here and tilting. And remember to have a cloth on standby to mop up on your paper and on the surface. So spritzing again, tilting. Now I will say is think about the light all the time. You want to keep really light areas. Even if you're painting completely abstract, you need lights, medium and darker tonal values. In watercolour, we need to think about the light right at the beginning, because we don't often use white paint like you would with acrylics or oils, so we have to reserve that. So I've kept a little bit of light there, sort of in the top right hand corner for now. That may go. So I am now using the pipette to apply the Paynes grey mixed with the ultramarine, and I'm tilting here to the right. And because it's thicker, it's not moving as fast, which is quite interesting. And it's a really dark colour. So I'm applying a little bit more of that colour, letting it drizzle there, and applying a little bit more. Be brave. You know, just think of this as therapeutic. You're experimenting, you're learning about your medium. So I'm tilting here, letting the paint run up into that quinacridone gold. But I'm sort of not touching the paper very much at all. I'm just allowing the paint to sort of dictate what happens, and just tilting sort of upside down, towards me, sideways, just getting the best out of these paints, pouring a little bit now of the Paynes grey with a pinch of the ultramarine and letting it tilt downwards. And you can see, because it has the quinacridone gold there, you've got some beautiful greens developing there as well. So I've tilted upside down. I'm just sort of kind of really being open to shapes and seeing what happens. At the moment, I'm not fixed on anything. I'm just sort of playing, adding paints and just exploring this. So don't be frightened of this. Enjoy it. Set yourself some time. Make sure you've got lots of things to mop up with. So I'm spritzing again. And when you spritz with the water, you're creating light and you're diluting the paint. So I'm tilting now horizontally just to see what happens. I quite like the effect there. It's quite atmospheric. It almost looks like a tree. So yes, of course, I love landscapes. So I'm going down that tree road. So I've got a little bit more dark here with the Paynes grey and a tiny touch of ultramarine still, and I'm tilting sort of going up towards the top of the paper for now. That could be the bottom, and I'm just tilting each way just to see what happens. What I find with tilting is it really does get the best out of watercolours. It doesn't get so contaminated. It's a very natural process of mixing on the paper without you using your brush to kind of stir things up. Sometimes too much brushwork sort of muddies the paint, disturbs the paper. This way you get some really pure, sort of transparent washes. So I'm adding a little bit of dark now at the bottom. You can see where I'm going now. I can sort of see a tree shape already. So I've added the dark there to have a bit of a darker foreground, just because your darker foreground will create depth in the painting. So I've got all these sort of tools that I'm using for landscapes. But again, your painting may not look like this, so just go with the flow. It's very exciting. So I'm just tilting here just to see what happens. And as you can see, I've got that Spritzer bottle on standby because I'm not sure about that dark there. So I'm just sort of spritzing here just to add a little bit more water to dilute that dark, and I'm tilting. I love some of the marks now developing on the paper, all those sort of organic sort of marks. I'm collecting some of the paint here with a sort of clean, damp brush. And I'm constantly tilting, constantly getting that paint moving. Now, I quite like the painting at the moment, but sometimes you can make decisions that you can lose your good bits, as it were. And I kind of do that next. I was a bit disappointed, but I still went with it. So I'm going to talk you through that now. So I'm tilting here and I quite like what's happening, that lovely kind of yellow sky with that silhouetted tree with the dark foreground. So I'm actually adding a little bit of water with my pipette to dilute that and to let it flow. It was sort of sitting there in sort of 3 separate dark areas. So I want them to blend and flow. So I'm adding a little bit of that water now to the centre of the tree to create some light here. And I'm tilting as well, but I wasn't sure about that, so I've added some more quinacridone gold to that centre, and I've kind of sort of got into a little bit of a panic here, and it happens to all of us, because I'm thinking, oh, I was happier with what I did previously, and now I'm sort of tilting all this sort of quinacridone gold that's turned green over my lovely silhouetted tree. So it's easy to kind of give up almost here, so just keep going with it. Remember, you are experimenting and exploring. So you may get a different painting. I got a little bit attached to that silhouetted tree. So now I've got to change course. So just go with the flow, see what happens, trust the process. So I'm spritzing with water now, still not quite happy about this tree, and I'm still attached to the tree slightly, to be honest. But I'm just sort of collecting, and I'm remembering to breathe as well. I've had a few panics over the years, and I've learned just to kind of just keep going. Don't rush it, just keep looking at it and just seeing if there's a little gem developing somewhere else. So I'm just spritzing this area here because it had a bit of a hard edge developing. So I want this to kind of be like a sky. Well, maybe for now. And I'm just mopping up that sort of paint that's run down. And I actually quite like what's happened. So something good happened out of that. I just kept going, and it's quite interesting. I'm just spritzing here because there's some hard edges there, and I want this to be like the sky in the distance. And I'm just sort of trying to soften that away. And I've decided to add some quinacridone gold to that so it doesn't look too blue, and it just sort of pushes it back a little bit more. I've actually decided to turn the painting upside down. So that sort of green, sort of splodgy area to the left there was the dark silhouetted tree, but I've turned it upside down so it looks like maybe sort of grasses and bushes maybe, or even reflections. And the sort of bottom half of the painting now has become the sort of canopy of the tree, and I've still got that tree trunk. And where I was sort of trying to get rid of those stripy lines on the left hand side there, which were previously on the right hand side, is now kind of my foreground, and it could be grasses, etc. So by turning your painting upside down, there may be a little gem there. So pouring that quinacridone gold over that area has created this. So this is such a good lesson in not panicking when sort of you lose something that you were really attached to that you thought was working well. Just go with the flow and see what happens. Watercolour is such a mobile medium. It changes all the time, and it will even change when it's dry. So when this painting dries, it will probably dry lighter, and some of those washes will move a little bit more. You'll get sort of harder edges. What I love there's some granulation from that little bit of ultramarine, and you've got some lovely sort of textured cauliflowers. So I love the fact you get cauliflowers using this technique as well. So I'm going to add a little bit of salt now and sprinkle it gently onto the damp surface, and I'm going to allow it to dry naturally, and the salt will absorb the paint to create some lovely light textures. And here is the painting dried, and you can see how much texture the salt has created, especially in the lighter sort of canopy of the tree there. But I love the light coming from behind the tree and that beautiful soft yellow light to the right hand side. I've actually decided not to do any more to this painting. I was tempted, I was going to put some branches through, a little bit of texture, but I wanted to leave it in this kind of raw state. I'm really pleased with it, and if I do any more painting this, I might lose this effect. So I can always have a go at painting another. I thought it'd be quite nice to put a mount around this painting as well. It can really bring a painting to life. It makes you more objective. And I really hope this inspires you to have a go at the pouring technique and working from your imagination. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments section. And if you'd like to support the content that I create here on YouTube, why not think about joining my Patreon membership? You will get access to my weekly exclusive tutorials, downloadable outline sketches, and you can cancel anytime. More details about the membership can be found in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. Happy pouring and experimenting. Bye for now.